The morning sun spilled through the curtains, painting the old wooden floor of our family home with golden streaks. I had always found comfort in that light, in the quiet hum of our little house, but that morning everything felt off, like the warmth of the sun couldn't touch the chill creeping in from within. My younger brother, Adil, was coming home. He hadn't been around for years, living in the city with his new wife, Farah. I had heard snippets of their life through relatives, mostly boasting of their successes, their trips, and the way Farah, with her sharp smile and sharper words, seemed to have charmed everyone in town. I tried not to feel jealousy. I told myself I should be happy for them. After all, family was family, and the heart could stretch to love more than one person. But I had underestimated the storm, waiting behind their polite smiles. The doorbell rang. I opened it to see Adil standing there, taller than I remembered, dressed in a crisp suit, holding Farah's hand. She looked at me, eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite name. Pride, triumph, or perhaps a subtle challenge. "Long time no see," Adil said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. I felt the walls of my home, the sanctuary of my childhood, shrink around me. "Come in," I muttered, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. Farah smiled, her eyes scanning the living room with a silent assessment. I hated the way she seemed to measure everything I had built in my own home, as if I were just another piece of furniture to be judged. My father appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held that distant look I had come to fear. He didn't greet Adil warmly, didn't smile at his new daughter-in-law. He just waited, and then he spoke. "Vacate the room," he said, his voice flat. The words struck me like a cold blade. My mind froze. What do you mean?" I stammered. "The room," he repeated. "You have to leave, now." I could feel my heart pounding against my chest, each beat a drum of disbelief and rising anger. "Dad, what are you saying? This is my home. I live here. You can't just—" Adil stepped forward, his expression a mixture of pity and satisfaction. Farah gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, and it was like a signal I hadn't seen coming. My father didn't argue. He didn't offer excuses. It was final. "Please, there must be some mistake." I pleaded. "I've lived here my whole life. I've taken care of this house of you." But my father's eyes didn't soften. They were empty of warmth, the kind of emptiness that screams betrayal louder than any words could. Adil and Farah exchanged a glance, quick and loaded. I realized then that this had been planned long before today, that their smiles and polite manners were nothing but masks, hiding a calculated move to push me out of everything I had ever known. I stumbled back, gripping the door frame, trying to steady myself. Memories of childhood laughter, of quiet nights reading by the lamp, of my father's stories and my mother's lullabies, all seemed to mock me now. The home I had thought would shelter me had become a cage, and now they were throwing me out. Farah's voice, smooth and deliberate, cut through the silence. "It's for the best. You'll understand someday." I wanted to scream, to throw them out, to shake some humanity into the people I had called family. But I couldn't. My father's silence anchored me. Adil's smug composure crushed me, and Farah's calm superiority stung more than any physical blow could. I packed a small bag in a daze, every movement feeling like betrayal against my own life. My father didn't stop me. Adil and Farah watched, silent observers of my humiliation. The house I had cherished, the family I had trusted, they had all turned against me in a single morning. As I walked out the door, carrying nothing but memories and a bag of clothes, I felt the first flicker of something dark, something I had never allowed myself to feel. Not sadness, not despair, not yet. It was anger. It burned quietly, almost invisibly, but I knew it would grow. And somewhere deep inside, I promised myself, this betrayal would not go unanswered. The streets were cold that evening, the winter air slicing through the thin jacket I had hastily thrown on. I had no plan, no place to go, and every familiar corner of my town seemed to mock me. I had left the house I grew up in, the home that had shaped me at my father's command, a command I still could not comprehend. Adil and Farah had settled into my room, laughing softly at something I didn't hear, while I wandered the streets with nothing but a bag of clothes and a heart full of disbelief. I tried calling friends, relatives, anyone who might offer shelter, but the responses were tepid, cautious. Some avoided me entirely, whispering behind their hands, "Better not get involved," as if my brother's quiet smile and Farah's subtle charm had given them some unspoken power over the entire town. Loneliness wrapped itself around me, heavy and suffocating. I had imagined this betrayal as a sudden crack in my world, but the reality was an earthquake shattering, relentless, and exposing every vulnerability I had tried to hide. I found temporary refuge in a small, run-down motel at the edge of the city. The walls were thin, and the smell of mildew clung to everything, but at least it was a roof over my head. As I lay on the stiff mattress, staring at the peeling ceiling, I kept replaying the scene in the family home. My father's blank eyes, Adil's smug grin, Farah's calculating nod, each image cut deeper than the last. Anger began to simmer beneath the despair, sharp and persistent. At first, it was raw, unshaped, a dangerous thing that almost consumed me. I thought about confronting them, yelling, tearing the house down with my own hands if I had to, but deep down, I knew brute force wouldn't work. I had been outplayed. Adil had used the law, cunning, and alliances I couldn't yet see. And Farah, oh Farah, her quiet intelligence, her careful precision, had turned my home into her throne while I was left homeless. As the nights passed, I started noticing things. Small clues, whispers from old neighbors, hints dropped by relatives who still held fragments of loyalty. Adil hadn't done this alone. A lawyer had been involved, someone meticulous, someone willing to exploit every loophole in the property laws. My brother had played the part of the obedient son, while Farah's strategy unfolded quietly behind the scenes. I began to map out their world in my mind, studying them like one studies prey. Farah's public facade of perfection hid a restlessness, a need for control. Adil's confidence was brittle, masking fear of losing status or facing accountability. They were powerful now, yes, but they were also blind to the consequences of underestimating me. And that became my lifeline. Each day, I scavenged for small victories, researching laws, reconnecting with old contacts, reaching out to anyone who could offer guidance. I swallowed pride after pride, accepting meals from strangers, borrowing books from libraries, sleeping on hard floors. Every humiliation, every pang of hunger, every sleepless night fueled a quiet determination. I wasn't just surviving, I was learning. Every setback became a lesson, every insult a spark for the fire growing inside me. The world outside my broken life seemed indifferent, but in that indifference lay an opportunity. I realized that revenge would not be simple. It would require patience, cunning, and a level of strategy I hadn't needed before. The first flicker of hope appeared when a former colleague, now a lawyer specializing in property disputes, listened to my story with a sharp, calculating interest. He didn't promise miracles, but he offered knowledge, a weapon I could wield against Adil and Farah. That night, as I lay on the floor of the motel room, staring at the dim light of a single bulb, I made a vow. I would not return to that house as the broken, humiliated version of myself. I would rise. And when I did, the people who had betrayed me, the brother who smiled too confidently, the wife who plotted too carefully, and even the father who had abandoned me, would understand the weight of their cruelty. The fire inside me was no longer just anger. It had turned into a quiet, unyielding resolve. I didn't know yet how I would strike back, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This fall, this homelessness, this betrayal, they were not the end of my story. They were only the beginning. The first time I stepped into the lawyer's office, I felt both fear and a strange thrill. The room smelled of leather and polished wood, and books lined the walls like soldiers standing at attention. My lawyer, Mr. Faison, was a tall, stern man with sharp eyes that seemed to see through my despair and into the very calculations I hadn't yet dared to voice. "You've been wronged," he said simply, leaning back in his chair, "but anger alone won't fix it. Strategy will, patience will, and the law, your law, can be sharper than their arrogance." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Weeks of wandering the streets, of sleeping in a stiff bed at the edge of town, of watching my brother and his wife live comfortably in the home that had been mine. Those weeks had honed my resolve. I listened carefully as Mr. Faison outlined my options, the loopholes, the legal avenues I had never imagined. The law could be my sword, and I realized that I had the strength to wield it, but knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. I needed to understand my enemies, to observe their weaknesses. I began subtly, visiting neighbors, attending town events, listening. Adil had grown careless, flaunting wealth and status in ways that revealed his overconfidence. Farah, elegant and precise, trusted too much in appearances. She assumed that her charm and cunning would remain invisible. I noted every slip of arrogance, every overconfident smile, storing them like weapons for the day they would matter. I also reconnected with old friends, those who had been quiet but loyal. Some were hesitant at first, wary of taking sides, but when I shared the details of betrayal, they could not deny the injustice. They became my allies, advisors, and eyes in places I could not reach. Their support reminded me that I wasn't truly alone, that even in my fall, I could find strength. The transformation was slow, almost imperceptible at first. I began taking evening classes, learning the legal and financial strategies I would need. I read cases, memorized property laws, and discovered the cracks in the structure Adil and Farah had built. With each new skill, the anger that had burned inside me turned into something sharper, calculated, patient, dangerous in the most elegant way. And then the small victories began. I filed preliminary motions, small inquiries that unsettled their sense of security. Adil's once confident smirk began to falter when letters arrived, when subtle notices hinted that his claim might not be as absolute as he thought. Farah's precise world, built on meticulous planning, showed cracks I had never imagined could exist. I watched from the shadows as their certainty began to waver, a subtle satisfaction curling in my chest. But this was more than revenge, it was reclamation. Every step I took was not just about proving them wrong. It was about rebuilding myself, forging strength from betrayal. Each day I felt more alive, more capable. I remembered nights of hunger and humiliation, and realized that I had been shaped by those experiences into someone no one could ignore. Late at night, alone in my rented room, I sketched the final phases of my plan. Legal maneuvers intertwined with social pressure, financial strategies intertwined with exposing arrogance and carelessness. It was meticulous work, requiring patience, timing, and a cool detachment I had never known I possessed. The thrill of it, the knowledge that I could take back what was mine without stooping to cruelty, was intoxicating, and yet beneath it all, a quiet caution lingered. Revenge was not a fire to be unleashed blindly. It was a tool to be wielded wisely. I knew that I could ruin them with a single misstep, or I could reclaim my life with grace and precision. I chose the latter. By the end of the month, the first tremors of their downfall were visible. Letters arrived, whispers circulated, doubts crept into their confident smiles. I watched, patient, as the house that had been taken from me began to feel less like a fortress and more like a fragile cage. I had risen from despair, from the streets, from the humiliation of being abandoned by family. I was no longer just a victim. I was a force. And when the day came to strike fully, Adil and Farah would realize that every smile, every word, every betrayal they had thought would destroy me, had only forged me stronger. The day I returned to the house felt surreal, almost cinematic. It was early morning, the sunlight spilling over the familiar walls I had once called my own. Adil and Farah had no idea I was coming not as a guest, not as a supplicant, but as someone entirely transformed, someone they could no longer dismiss. The street was quiet, almost reverent, as if it too sensed the storm that was about to unfold. I walked up to the door, holding nothing but a briefcase, my expression calm, composed. When I rang the bell, it was not the anxious tremor of the boy they had expelled weeks ago. It was the assured knock of someone who had learned patience, strategy, and the cruel precision of justice. Adil opened the door, and for a brief second I saw it. Hesitation, the faintest crack in his confident facade. Farah appeared behind him, perfectly composed, smiling as though she could read my thoughts. But I had learned how to smile when every cell in my body was screaming, and I returned her gaze evenly, a quiet promise in my eyes. "Good morning," I said softly. "I believe you've been expecting me." They exchanged a glance subtle but unmistakable. The calm had left their features. I stepped inside. The house felt different now, not mine, but familiar enough that it stung. I let my eyes linger on the furniture, the memories, the rooms I had built with love and sweat. And then I set my briefcase down, opening it to reveal stacks of papers, legal documents, and carefully compiled evidence. "I think you'll want to look at these," I said, spreading them across the dining table. "Contracts, loopholes, financial statements, everything you thought was hidden, every corner you thought was clean. It isn't. Your claim to this house, your manipulation of my father, the misuse of legal authority, it all comes undone." Farah's eyes widened slightly, just enough for me to catch it. Adel's jaw tightened, and a twitch betrayed the panic he tried to mask. Their empire of arrogance, built on my father's absence and my initial vulnerability, was unraveling before their eyes. How did you?" Adel stammered, but I cut him off. I said simply. "I learned patience, strategy, and the truth of every hidden move you made. You thought you could take everything and leave me with nothing, but I've been preparing, and preparation, you'll find, is far more dangerous than anger alone." Then I revealed the final piece, a legal maneuver that would not only void their claim to the house, but also expose Farah's manipulation and Adel's complicity. Their wealth, their carefully constructed image, their smug superiority, all of it was vulnerable now. Farah's face paled, and she grasped Adel's arm, realizing too late that charm and manipulation were powerless against calculated strategy. The arrogance that had blinded them for so long now turned against them, every lie, every underhanded move exposed to the sunlight of truth. The best part was not the legal victory, it was their recognition of it. I watched as the certainty drained from their eyes, replaced by a fear and disbelief I had felt myself weeks ago. The tables had turned entirely, and in that moment I felt no glee, no vindictive pleasure, only the quiet, satisfying power of justice restored. "Consider this closure," I said softly. "For me, for the home, for everything you tried to take from me. You forced me out, but you could never take my will, my mind, or my spirit. That belongs to no one but me." Adel sank into a chair, defeated, while Farah's perfect composure cracked in tiny, imperceptible ways. The humiliation was subtle, internal, but it cut deeper than any shouting or public disgrace. They had believed themselves untouchable, and now they understood the cost of underestimating the person they betrayed. I didn't gloat. I didn't revel in their misery. Instead, I reclaimed what was mine, closed the legal cases, and began the slow process of repairing my father's fractured trust. The house, once a symbol of loss, became a testament to resilience. Every room, every corner, every memory reclaimed was a quiet declaration. I had survived, I had grown, and I had won. Not through cruelty, but through patience, intelligence, and unwavering determination. That night, as I sat in the living room, the familiar golden light spilling over the floor, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The storm of betrayal had passed, leaving behind clarity, strength, and a sense of peace. Adel and Farah would carry the weight of their actions, but I carried something far heavier, the knowledge that even in the darkest hour, I had the power to rise, to reclaim, and to triumph. And for the first time in weeks, I felt truly home.